If you're like me, you love drugs. Okay, if you're like me, you love lore, and you're probably wondering about some of the drugs and the lore behind them in the universe of Starfield. The most prominent drug mentioned and encountered by us spacefarers is the drug called Aurora. In this video, we'll be examining Aurora in all aspects, including how it's made, its impact on the people of the settled systems, and more. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who watched my last Starfield lore video on the Terramorphs. And if you want to keep up with all things Starfield, definitely check out starfieldwiki.net, run by the team behind UESP. As we explore the Starfield, we notice that Aurora is sometimes innocuously brought up by the denizens of New Atlantis on Jemison, particularly those who may have an affinity for partying or letting loose. We can even find our parents discussing Aurora in the Astral Lounge as if it was marijuana from good old Earth, with our mothers saying that it's legal here, implying that Aurora isn't too big of a deal to either purchase or consume, provided that it's done so legally. However, unlike marijuana, Aurora is artificially created and is far more sinister than some weed we smoked as teenagers. Notably, Aurora is incredibly illegal to even possess outside of the jurisdiction of the City of Neon on the oceanic planet Valai Alpha. If you're caught with Aurora outside of Neon in any of the civilized parts of the settled systems, it's basically imprisonment, fines, and potentially death if you're keen on smuggling it as contraband. We see an example of this crackdown when we observe Nishar getting arrested by Neon security guards for allegedly smuggling when we get to Neon. Initially, we may dismiss such governmental crackdown on Aurora as simply extreme, or just a case of Big Brother being Big Brother, but our first hint as to how potent and dangerous Aurora really is when we try it for ourselves at the Astral Lounge on Neon, provided we have the credits. Immediately, the effects are noticeable. A surge of euphoria wells up in the very center of our being. The colors become so vivid that we can taste their flavors. The lights and sounds of the universe mix together in an indescribable cacophony. Time seems to literally slow down around us as our mind ascends to a plane of pleasure we didn't even know we could travel to. And then, it's all over in what seems to be an instant. The Aurora was so strong that despite our strong constitution, we immediately become addicted to it. There are no stages to the addiction, there is no choice, we simply get addicted right away. It's a jarring experience taking our first hit of Aurora, so we decide to step out of the Astral Lounge, which now seems less colorful, less attractive. As we walk down the streets of Neon's core, we notice that there's an alcoholic beverage store called Legrand's Liquors. Perhaps a good old-fashioned drink will help us with our nerves before we get to Reliant Medical for a doctor's assistance. We walk into the store and chat up the owner, Yannick Legrand, who reveals that he has a lineup of specially made drinks called Blend. He boasts that it's his hottest selling product and hints that there is a secret ingredient. Our curiosity is piqued, and we give a few credits to let us in on the secret recipe. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the secret ingredient is Aurora. We politely leave the store before our newfound craving for Aurora takes over our cred stick and continue our way to Reliant Medical, whereupon we talk to a Dr. Manning who notes that we aren't looking well. Before we submit ourselves for a medical examination, we ask Dr. Manning how exactly does Aurora work?
Aurora stimulates the neural circuits in the brain, specifically targeting the neurotransmitter serotonin in the prefrontal cortex. This causes significant sensory hallucinations, both auditory and visual. That's the enticement factor. As you can imagine, this state is highly addictive, and the user gets stuck in a vicious cycle. They need more Aurora to satisfy their cravings. Well, it's completely dependent upon how long the user's been addicted. People have been using for, say, 2 years or less. I've been able to put through a full detoxification program successfully, but there are others who have been addicted pretty much all their adult lives, and I have yet to try and cure someone who hasn't relapsed.
At this point, we now know that Aurora can not only be ingested, smoked or otherwise consumed in its crystalline form, but also diluted or incorporated into other forms of consumption such as drinks and potentially food. The immediate addiction, the incremental ramps to getting high, the confidence it gives to notorious Red Mile runners mentioned by May on Porma 3, and the methods of using Aurora certainly shows it's based on a bizarre mix of drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, crystal meth, PCP, and so on from our own reality. As we learn this information, our Aurora addiction kicks in, and the temptation is there to maybe go back to Yannick's store, or perhaps get Aurora without paying somehow, as we are a little tight on budget. I mean, after all, what's the harm? The good doctor said that recovery was possible anyway, even for addicts who used for 2 years. No harm in having a bit more fun before we flush the junk out. We are suddenly reminded of Nishar, the smuggler who was caught by Neon security. We abruptly leave Reliant Medical without getting a checkup, and end up talking to Nishar in Neon's jail, who implores us to finish his delivery run to Yannick Legrand, coincidentally enough, and to let Yannick know that he didn't flip and is staying loyal. After retrieving the mysterious package from Nishar's sleeping crate, we deliver to Yannick in his store. More than likely, it's Aurora for his blend drinks. Yannick then asks us if we're interested in joining his little operation. But there are risks as we find out that Aurora simply can't be sold by anyone else except by the Astral Lounge, which is owned by Benjamin Bayou, the owner of said lounge, the domineering trade tower, and basically the entire city of Neon. It's illegal for anyone else to sell it. However, Yannick has a plan and says he has a contact within the belly of the beast, the source of all Aurora production in the settled systems, Xenofresh. The plan is for us to meet with our contact as an official Xenofresh worker by applying for, you guessed it, a job under a false identity. We agree, as we figure we can be discreet enough to sneak around under Bayou's gaze. After all, we're a very small operation, and if we can rake in some side credits and some free Aurora for ourselves, why the hell not? After we fill out the application for a production line chemist position, upon which we say that our greatest strength is our literal strength and that our biceps are huge for that production line, we head on over to Xenofresh's production facility as we manage to snag a job interview with a Miss Valentina Grov. As we make our way to the underbelly of Neon, we notice that there's a Xenofresh storefront, and we figure maybe it'd be smart to research a little about Xenofresh and its products before this job interview, because there's only so much faking it till we make it that can be done at this point. So you talk to Glenn, the storefront manager, and you learn that the primary Xenofresh food product is not so fresh.
Yeah, trust me, you don't want it. They take everything left over from the Aurora processing and grind it into a paste. Yeah, that's bones and all. And then they add some kind of oh god, what do they call it? Alginate? Yeah, they say they add that for vitamins. Gross, right?
We even find out, much to our discomfort, that Glenn isn't even working for credits. He's working for Aurora, which is absolutely insane to consider. It's like if companies in our reality peddled crack, but also paid us for doing our jobs in crack. And not only that, but because we're addicted to crack, they know we won't quit because some other crack addict out there will easily take our spot. At this point, we understand that Aurora isn't just a pleasure drug, nor a way to make profits, but it's to keep a leash on the populace of Neon. All around us, the extreme gang violence, the abject poverty, and the squalid living conditions of most of Neon's inhabitants, despite living in a city where tourism and corporate business is thriving, become clearer with the context given by mass drug addiction. As we head towards the Xenofresh production facility, we notice that a guard is patrolling by the carcasses of dead alien fish native to Volii Alpha called chasm bass. They look quite fearsome, and we recall from the conversation with Glenn that the chasm bass are used for not just the production of trawl, but also Aurora. We head in for a job interview and get the job. Valentina even dryly remarks that we can show her our massive biceps later. Clearly, we impressed her with our biceps. Donning a Xeno-fresh clean suit, we learned how to make unrefined Aurora. In a laboratory like something out of Breaking Bad, we discovered the ingredients of a bottle of Aurora. Some stimulants, benzene, hallucinogens, a measurement of fluorine, some amino acids, chlorine, and 3 measurements of water. The last secret ingredient is of course a flask of oil secreted by the chasm bass, which explains why so many are fished out and harvested in Neon. Not only are the chasm bass a source of protein, but also the reason why Aurora works the way it works. Walter Stroud remarks that the properties of the chasm bass's natural oils was discovered by human colonists to have psychotropic effects, which isn't too surprising as humans have licked frogs and toads to get high in our reality. We finish our shift by creating 3 containers of unprocessed Aurora. We are simply a step in this drug assembly line as the final product is refined in a different part of the facility, then stored in big containers in the storage room ready for shipment, most likely to the Astral Lounge. The storage room is absolutely filled to the brim with containers upon containers of Aurora, enough to probably kill the population of Neon twice over should people have unrestricted access to it. We finally meet with our contact in Xenofresh, who turns out to be a woman by the name of Roby Hanegar. She points you to a drop-off location she marks for us, and this apparently will be a continued arrangement in the future. After retrieving the embezzled Aurora, we make our way back to Yannick and, surprise surprise, Benjamin Bayou, the tyrant of Neon, is there with armed guards. As we brace ourselves for violence, Bayou reveals that he's known all about Yannick's small operation and blend, and threatens us. However, being the cruel businessman he is, Bayou senses more credits to be made, and instead lets Yannick continue his operation with blend drinks as long as Yannick kicks back 20% of Yannick's profits directly to Bayou. With that, he departs richer than before. Benjamin Bayou more than likely has always known, or at least predicted, the illicit sales of Aurora under his nose in various locations around Neon, including the members' lounge in Euphorica. The only reason he steps in personally with Yannick's operation is that Yannick now has a direct line to the Xenofresh Aurora production facility, which could be bad for Bayou's monopoly on Aurora. So instead of causing a scene at Yannick's store that could harm tourism, which also generates credits for him, Bayou plays it cool and instead brings Yannick's blend business into his sphere of influence, which is also beneficial as Bayou doesn't want his own involvement directly in illicit Aurora trade for appearance's sake. It's quite depressing that Bayou is not only a legitimate governor in the ruling body of the Freestar Collective, the Council of Governors, but that such a rich individual, who essentially has everything he could possibly want, uses Aurora as a method of control over the people living under his rule. The cost of lives and families destroyed by the crippling Aurora epidemic both on Neon and elsewhere in the Zealot systems is simply nothing to such a man who orders the continued production of the drug for credits and power. The greater shame in this is that the corporations that reside on Neon are also fine with Bayou's arrangement, as the Aurora's effects on Neon help suppress any potential public opposition to the corporations or any worker movements. Themes in this part of the Aurora lore is eerily similar to how the opium epidemic in pre-20th century China produced serious issues amongst its population, essentially crippling it, which came as a result of the foreign injection of opium into society by a swathe of companies, smugglers, and other powers seeking profit. Perhaps just as depressing are the consequences of the mass production of Aurora on the ecosystem. It seems the ocean planet of ApoAlaia Alpha is home to 2 large aquatic species, the red shark whale that seems to be rather docile, or at least non-threatening to humans, and of course the chasm bass that humans harvest for the production of Aurora, while also being, for the most part, docile unless threatened. But if we wander away from Neon and swim around in the disturbingly dark and quiet oceans of ApoAlaia Alpha, we hardly see any chasm bass. We can't even find a single chasm bass around the continental slope. We rarely see the shark whales as well, which are implied to have evolved alongside the chasm bass. It all starts making more sense when we find chasm bass living directly under the belly of Neon, and we harvest each one. We can only get enough chasm bass oil for 1 bottle of Aurora, which is absolutely insane, and is equivalent to humanity egregiously hunting down animals in our own history for just a horn or something. The production of Aurora not only destroys the lives of thousands of humans, but also continues to destroy the very environment it's produced from. Animal populations dwindling or going extinct as a result of human activity, indirectly or directly, is unfortunately not news to us spacefarers. Even in our own reality, we don't even necessarily kill species just to kill them. We cut down forests, overfish, produce industrial waste, partake in wars against each other, and more, which affect other living creatures and the very environments in which we must live. From 2019 to 2022, we even saw roughly 10 billion snow crabs simply die off from a variety of factors such as overfishing and ocean temperature that can not only be traced back to us humans, but the end result directly affects us as well, economically and ecologically. Truly, Aurora is not only a potent drug that should not even be considered recreational for humans to partake in, but a product that's destroying the marine life of Valai Alpha. More than likely, worst case scenario, if the population of chasm bass keeps plummeting, Benjamin Bayou will order the creation of artificial chasm bass farms and breeding programs to keep up Aurora production, which is entirely fitting thematically since Aurora itself is artificial. I really enjoyed exploring Aurora, and as someone who is more than familiar with drug addiction, the characters of Neon, their motivations, and the environmental storytelling really spoke to me on a personal level. I hope that you enjoyed this lore video on Aurora as well, and if you did, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all out there in the Starfield.